Tony, in his remarks, mentioned the Western Reserve Historical Society, which, as you know, has been home to the Italian archives for quite some time. Much of that archive now sits in the Italian-American Museum here on Mayfield Road. And with us today is the executive director of the museum, Pamela, Dorazio-Dean, who is going to talk a little bit about the history, but also share some additional information about the Western Reserve, as well as the museum. So, Pam, please come on up.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here and to participate in this momentous occasion. As a historian who has studied the Italian Americans of Cleveland for the last 20 years, this to me is a very important landmark in preserving that history. In a 1958 speech delivered during his tenure as the first Italian mayor of the city of Cleveland, Anthony J. Celebrezzi stated, "Ever since Columbus, Italians have given a bright hue to the American tapestry. Indeed, we have. The over 4 million Italians who immigrated to America from 1880 to 1920, their succeeding generations, and the following waves of Italian immigrants have contributed to and excelled in many different aspects of American life, including business, politics, art, science, and education. One particular area in which Italians have made outstanding and unique contributions, and what we are here honoring today, is aesthetically beautifying our country and specifically the city of Cleveland through the art of stone carving and sculpting. Italians are renowned the world over for their amazing skill and talent with carving and sculpting stone. It is an art that arose in ancient times and passed from the Egyptians to the Greeks and eventually to the Italians. The Italians perfected the art by honing the necessary skills through the centuries of working with the raw materials of the earth found in stone quarries throughout Italy, such as those located in Carrara and Tuscany. Artistic geniuses such as Michelangelo, Bernini, Donatello, and Brunelleschi achieved greatness in the art of sculpting stone that even the passage of time cannot diminish. Being unparalleled in the field of stone sculpting, a demand for Italian artisans arose in America in the 19th and early 20th centuries when cities were growing and building. Italian stone carvers and cutters were recruited to work throughout the nation to carve intricate, ornate details on new government and municipal buildings, homes of the wealthy, and create public monuments. Cleveland, Ohio was no exception, and the handiwork of the Scalpellini, as these artisans are called in Italian, is evident throughout our city, one of the most unique and prominent works being the Guardians of Traffic. Cleveland's Little Italy is the place where the history of the Scalpellini in our city is rooted, due in large part to a sculptor and businessman from Porto Ceresio, Italy, by the name of Giuseppe Carabelli. Carabelli apprenticed with a stone sculptor beginning at the age of 11. At the age of 20, he immigrated to America and worked in quarries in Maine, and eventually made his way to New York City, where he carved stone for New York's post office and the Statue of Industry for the city's federal building. Carabelli brought his wife, Annetta, and family to Cleveland in 1880. He and James Berghini, another Italian stone carver, opened a monument company directly across from Lakeview Cemetery on Euclid Avenue. Carabelli became the sole proprietor of this company in the late 1880s and renamed it Lakeview Granite and Monument Works. It eventually became the Carabelli Company and quickly developed a reputation for creating fine works in stone. To carry out this work, Carabelli employed Italian immigrants highly skilled in the art of stone cutting and carving, whom he himself recruited from Italy. Many of these artisans, settled in the neighborhood near his Euclid Avenue shop. The neighborhood was in an area located next to Lakeview Cemetery, bordered by what is today East 119th and East 125th Streets, and centered on Mayfield and Murray Hill Roads. It was initially known as the East End, but with the influx of Italian immigrants, it became the East End Italian settlement by the 1890s, and eventually Little Italy. Due to his bringing Italians to this neighborhood and to his philanthropy towards the Italian immigrants living here, Carabelli is considered the father of Little Italy. Many of the Italian immigrants he recruited and who settled in Little Italy came from the region of Molise in southern Italy, specifically from paesi, or towns in and around the province of Campobasso. Stone carving and sculpting was a common and long-standing tradition in this region. Many of the towns in Molise are built entirely of stone and include intricately carved architectural features and statuary. There is no question as to why Carabelli recruited workers for his granite works from this province. His efforts resulted in a chain of migration from this region of Italy to Cleveland, thus populating the neighborhood with Italians from several towns in that area, including Oratino, which has a long tradition of families working in quarries and stone carving. The Scapolini, who ended up in Little Italy, not only found work at Carabelli's company, they also found jobs with the city and a number of other firms specializing in stone cutting and carving, including the Ohio Cut Stone Company, which had 2 locations. One was in Amherst, Ohio, where there was a quarry, and the second was located right here, where we are gathered today. The Ohio Cut Stone Company purposely set up shop in Little Italy because they knew that many Scapolini, who could provide the skilled work and expert craftsmanship that they needed, lived here. The guardians of traffic that tower over the Hope Memorial Bridge are easily the best-known work created by the Ohio Cut Stone Company. The Hope Memorial Bridge, once known as the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge, is a major thoroughfare connecting the east and west side of Cleveland over the Cuyahoga River. Discussions about constructing this bridge began as early as 1911, when Cleveland was rapidly growing. After some delays due to the outbreak of World War I, construction on the bridge began shortly after a 1927 bond issue was approved. Walker and Weeks, a local but very prominent architectural firm, was hired to work with the city engineer in designing the bridge to bring an artistic touch to this utilitarian structure. Walker and Weeks introduced several ideas to create a more artistic appearance on the bridge. The winning idea was to construct 4 massive pylons, which would contain some sort of sculpture. Architect Frank Walker conceptualized the sculpture and called them the Guardians of Traffic. He designed them with an Art Deco flair described as classicism with a modernistic style. They are said to resemble the Greek god Hermes. Henry Herring of New York was contracted as the lead sculptor of the Guardians. At the time, he was widely respected for his ability to create spectacular architectural sculptures. The Ohio Cut Stone Company was hired to obtain the stone and carry out Herring's carving instructions. Berea sandstone, a locally available and durable stone, would be used for the Guardians. The stone was likely quarried at the Ohio Cut Stone Company's location in Amherst, and then shipped by railroad to this Little Italy location to be carved, after which it would take its final journey to the bridge for placement. Many hours of planning, measuring, carving, and chipping away of stone occurred right here in this steel frame structure by a crew of immigrants, the majority being Scapolini, who immigrated to Cleveland from Oratino, Campobasso, Italy. These men lived in Little Italy and walked to the Ohio Cut Stone Company to do their work day and night, returning home for meals and some rest. The residents of Little Italy were excited to see the miracle of shapeless blocks of sandstone turning into grand figures. A 1983 Plain Dealer article included a brief interview with Henry Chiocchio, nephew of Gennaro Chiocchio, one of the Scapolini. Henry, who was just a young boy when the Guardians were being carved here, remembered visiting the Ohio Cut Stone Company with his dad and uncle each night after supper to see the day's progress. Henry said, "I remember seeing the heads, shoulders, and the vehicles of the pylons being formed. I was very impressed. We Italian people are very proud of what we do, especially in working with our hands." Yes, proud but humble. These talented Oretinese men were not doing this job for recognition or awards. They did it because it was what they were trained to do, and did it well and with pride, because that's how Italians do things. When the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge finally opened to traffic in 1932, people were in awe of the 43-foot tall Guardians on the bridge. But not much was said about who created and brought to life those great works of art, except for the architects Walker and Weeks and lead sculptor Henry Herring. The Italian immigrants, the Scapolini from Oretino, were overlooked. These talented men who put their heart and soul into creating these impressive works were forgotten and never mentioned. Some recognition came when the bridge and the Guardians were refurbished in the early 1980s. Upon reopening the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge in 1983, it was renamed the Hope Memorial Bridge in honor of William Henry Hope, father of the comedian and native Clevelander Bob Hope. William was on the crew that helped to create the Guardian. The mention of Hope's father led to other crew members' names being mentioned. And about that time, Del Mastrangelo, who Tony mentioned, whose father, Dominic Antonio Mastrangelo, was one of the Scapolini, published an article in the Little Italy neighborhood newsletter connecting the neighborhoods to the Guardians and listing the name of the Little Italy Scapolini from Oretino who were on the crew. The story was out, and they were finally receiving acknowledgement. When the Cleveland baseball team decided to rename the team the Guardians after these iconic statues, the full story of the Guardians that included the contributions of the Scapolini started to be shared. At the Italian-American Museum of Cleveland, a small exhibit shed light on the Scapolini and their role in creating the Guardians. But today, with the dedication of this historical marker, the talented, hard-working immigrants from Oretino are finally receiving the full public recognition they deserve for their artistry and skill in creating these unique and now iconic Guardians. To make it even more meaningful, the marker's text is also written in Italian. Including the text in Italian on the plaque is significant because many of the early 20th century Italian immigrants had to give up their language in order to be accepted into American society at the time. Including Italian on the plaque acknowledges our unique culture. The credit for making this marker really goes to Mary Fatica Martin. Mary dedicated several years to researching and diligently completing the application, making sure every I was dotted and T crossed. Grazie mille, Mary. Because of your efforts, the contributions of the Scapolini that like their work are now set in stone, and current and future residents and visitors will be able to learn about and appreciate their talents and contributions and the significance of their labors for years to come. Thank you.